Welcome, everybody, to another episode of the Beyond Train podcast. I'm your host, Leo Dalton. Today, we have a great guest on, Azeem Ali. And I've been following this man's work for a while now, um, for quite a number of years now. And he's always been a very sound mind, in my opinion. And he's been very helpful as well in my journey because he's someone who's been able to see through the veils of what's really going on. And for that, he's always had a very grounded perspective, which I really, really appreciate. Things that he talks about and teaches and learns has always really resonated with me. So I really appreciate this man and what he's doing, and I'm so grateful to have him on today for a discussion. And yeah, I'm really looking forward to this chat because obviously we have a lot in common, and um, I think that he's really on a great path here. So Azeem, thank you so much for coming on today.
Thank you very much, Leo. I'm delighted to be on, and I'm sure we're going to have a very good conversation here today.
Yeah, I agree. Okay, so I start the discussion off with asking the question, what is health? What does it mean to you? How does it manifest? What does it look like? You can get as concrete or as philosophical as you'd like, but we'll open the floor there, and it always gives us a good foundation to build off of. So what is health?
That's a really good question. Often one of those questions that you don't typically reflect on too much throughout your day, but you work towards it effortlessly to achieve it. To me, the kind of understanding of health that stood out to me on my research and reading different authors and books and things like that was Rudolf Steiner's sort of vision of health, which was all based on rhythm and the rhythmical nature of man. When we align ourselves to the rhythm of not just ourselves, but to the cosmos, to the macro, to the micro of this reality, we can achieve extraordinary benefits by doing that. And oftentimes, what you'll see is when we come out of rhythm, out of our natural rhythm and flow, we start to embody more of a dis-ease type condition of the body. Things don't seem to flow that well, and all the elements, the world, the cosmos, down to the microbes in the soil, they're all they all have their own rhythm. Sounds have their own rhythm, and we love that rhythm. We tune into that rhythm every single day. Vision is rhythmical. Um, and these huge rhythms of day and night, of the beaches, of the waves of the ocean. These these again represent that rhythmical nature in which our bodies also possess that rhythm as well. We have the circadian rhythm in which our organs are attuned to our biological clock, which is attuned to the stars and the cosmos and the day and night cycles. And it's when we start to come out of rhythm, when we start to when things start to interrupt the flow of energy in the body, where we start to experience these bouts of illness and disease. And oftentimes, if you compare a person who embodies health and somebody who doesn't embody health, who looks quite sickly and ill, oftentimes what you'll find is the person with health has rhythm in their life. They acknowledge rhythm, they're attuned to rhythm, and you'll see it throughout their lifestyle, throughout their days, what they get up to, throughout their biology, what their biology gets up to, you know. And the ones that are not so well off and not so healthy, they're often discombobulated in many things. There's no flow to their lives. And it's that ultimate saying of stagnation is the true cause of disease. When things are still, when things do not move, that's ultimately what creates this condition of disease, of detriment, of destruction, because everything is rhythmical, and when that rhythm stops, then we lose that life force. And so, as an example, which is also a little bit of a tangent, but something that's resonating with me at the moment, because I'm going through my own sort of journey at this moment in time to restore my vision naturally, right? And I've not been wearing my glasses for just over a month. And I'm learning so much about not just my own nature of vision and eyes, but in just general how we see and perceive the world. And vision is very much rhythmical. Our eyes are always moving. When the sun is strong and the sun and there's clear light, our eyes do well. When the sun goes down and it's cloudy and it's a dark day, our eyes don't do well. We're attuned to the rhythms of nature. But because one of the principles of good vision is movement, when we if I tell somebody to stare at a wall for 5 minutes, you are really destroying your eyes. It's this stagnation, this lack of movement of vision, which disrupts the rhythmical flow of your eyes and is what creates vision problems. And so when you learn how to master the eyes and learn correct vision principles and habits, you can restore your vision. So it's this understanding of, if everything's rhythmically based and we put ourselves back in alignment with that rhythm, we can achieve, extraordinary bouts in our health.
Yeah, very well put. I really enjoy the perspective you take to this sort of as above, so below principle throughout as well. Like you can relate the stagnation to all disease, and you could relate it to the stagnation of waters, even, when the waters become stagnant, you see that there's buildup. And I think when I'm thinking back to my discussion with the Biggleson brothers, there can be a factor, a scar that's causing that buildup as well, which I think is something interesting to look into, whether it be traumatic or physical. Not necessarily that the traumatic incidents don't create a physical response in the body. I think they certainly do, but I love this idea of stagnation. It's something that the osteopaths talk about a lot, which is why I'm a big fan of osteopathy, and I really appreciate their perspective on health and wellness. And yeah, I love this sort of rhythm state that you're talking about. And I think it shouldn't be confused for this sort of rigid state either. Like it doesn't mean having this set s- habits throughout your day that you have to do. You have to wake up and do this, and you have your morning routine that's 2 hours long of biohacking or whatever it is, right? There's a certain point where it becomes more stressful and detrimental to hold yourself to these rigid conditions, but being in tune with the swings of life, I feel like is more what you're alluding to here.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. When we look at trees in the distance and we see them flow with the wind, they're going back and forth. They're attuned to the rhythm of the world, right? And they're free flowing. And I'm really big in this, understanding of resistances, because if we're talking about rhythm, we have to talk about the rhythm of our own life, of our own making. And our lives are always in rhythm. They're always flowing. But it's when we resist certain rhythms, this resistance is what can create dis-ease on all levels: physical, emotional, spiritual, psychological. Because if we're supposed to flow with the ever present now, which is what Dr. John Whitman Ray would call the present moment, the ever present now. When we resist that moment is when we create what you're talking about, is this stagnation, this scarring within the body, because we're not okay with the way life is, what life is presenting with you. We're not okay with it. We want it to change. We want it to move. We want something different. And in this instance, in where we have denied our own rhythm, we create these scarrings in our body. And that's what I mean by health, is that the person who is healthy doesn't have these rigid days. They wake up 8 a.m. they do this, 9 a.m. they do this. It's like this really rigid pattern, which is often very, very stressful, and it's not how nature intended us to live our lives. Rather, they are attuned to the rhythms of nature and the world, right? These people are creative. They express their creativity. They have a fine love for music and sounds and vibration, which are all rhythm, right? They see rhythm when they look at the world. So being attuned to rhythm is not the same as having a rigid day-to-day life. Um, so it's more of that aspect of what you're talking about. It's being attuned and being able to comprehend rhythm in all levels and apply that to your own life.
Yeah. I can relate to that because I'm a very structured person by nature. I feel like I tend towards this sort of daily structure. And if I set a plan and that plan it doesn't unfold as I think it should, it's something that I've noticed that, when there's this introduction of chaos, it's something that I struggle with. And so actually learning to kind of implement a structure into my life that is not rigid was important for me because I do believe some people tend towards a structured way, but I don't think it needs to be rigid. And there, because life is chaotic, things come up all the time. You have to learn to move when the wind blows you in the right direction, the tree knows to move, right? Um it's not something that they even have to think about. And um if we're talking about Steiner, right? Like bodies, like animals or even the plant bodies, they don't have this ego, this consciousness where they need to think about what they're doing. It's that is the ever present now, and that is as humans, we have this beautiful mind which can be used absolutely for amazing things, but you can get lost in it so easily, and you can get stuck in the past, or you can get stuck even thinking about the future, and we see these manifest as what we call anxiety and depression, and maybe there is a necessity of going back and healing and creating safety within your past if it was traumatic in a way, but it all happens in the now at the same time. If you're going to try and heal through something that has happened, right, you need to do it in the moment, and you need to create that safety in the moment, which I think is a sort of an interesting way of looking at it, one that resonates with me. But I don't know if you have any thoughts on that there.
Yeah. Yeah, as I was mentioning before, this idea of resistances and how we how we always find ourselves in a position, especially if we're not trained in these principles of discernment, to always negate our experiences of life, right? The rhythm of life, we negate it, we condemn it, we deny it, we don't want it to be that way. And this is the essence. Like, what we're getting into is the essence of how two people can be in the same exact situation but have completely different experiences. When we when we deny our experience, when we oppose it, when we go through a period of chaos, a period of trauma, a period of pain, sad moments, and we don't want it to be this way, we avoid it. In German New Medicine, we talk about these conflicts and how that translates into the biology. It's the same process. When we resist the forces, the flow of life, we actually create crystals and calcifications in our body. When we deny a trauma and deny the experience of trauma, although that may be necessary in that moment in time for you to function and to be alive and to move forward, when we don't process all that comes with that experience, it often gets buried in our body. And we can see that as calcifications and crystallizations that form in the body. They form up and down the spine, they form within the bowels, they form in different organs, tissues, and glands. They block nerve flow, they block cerebrospinal fluid, and they can really, really hinder our cell, our biology. And we're getting it. And when we're talking about resistances, this is what Dr. John McMurray, his whole understanding of body electronics, is a amazing. I would say he's a sort of online mentor of mine. He talks about when we create these resistances and we deny the ever present now. We don't want to process the ever present now. It's too hard. It's too difficult for us. We create these crystallizations within our body. What those crystals actually hold are those exact experiences. When we go through life, we have every creative act in our life has a thought pattern, it has a memory, and it has an emotion. So it has a word pattern. Sorry, has a word pattern. These are the auditory things you would say in that experience. We have the memory, and we have the emotion. The emotions that we elicit in those times where we're denying the experience. And so encoded in these crystals that block the flow of energy within the body are the memory, the word patterns, and the emotions. And that's why healing and what you're talking about is we have to experience things in the now. In order to heal that crystallization, we've got to dissolve that crystal and re-experience those situations in which we've denied, and we've got to let that flow into us and process it properly. And it just shows that even the simplest act of not being present can hinder us on so many different levels. And so practicing daily ways in which you can attune yourself to the rhythm of life. It's all rhythmical. It's all flowing. If you can attune yourself to that and learn the skills of not denying your experiences in life. I love a quote that John Whitman Ray mentions, which is, declare to yourself that you will wake up and lovingly and willingly endure all things. No matter what situation you're in, no matter what you find yourself, the circumstances that you find yourself in, declare to yourself that you will lovingly and willingly endure it. And this is one of the ways in which you can prevent yourself from opposing your experiences and creating that crystallization and that resistance of that experience.
Beautiful. Yeah, I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. Now, I really enjoy the perspective you take on how these patterns get crystallized in the body and how it creates the stagnation as well. Can it be like, I guess what I want to ask is, you can approach it from processing it cognitively, maybe, or in the present through the mind. Is there a physical component to breaking these down through maybe movement or body work or things like that? What are your thoughts on that?
There are a lot of components to it, so you can approach it at a and it's not one is the dominant one. It's like you should, with your health, whatever healing journey you're on, to me it's like you're approaching it on all the levels, because oftentimes what has occurred in the physical body has already manifested itself in the spiritual bodies, in the mental bodies, and the emotional bodies. They were already present there, and that sort of dent within the auric field has manifested itself eventually in the physical body. And so in order to heal what that physical manifestation is of a emotional or traumatic problem, spiritual problem, you've got to heal it on all levels, right? So when we're talking about dissolving these crystals, this can be done through the act of the act of this is where it gets a little bit tricky, because John Whitman Ray, who I really recommend you look into,
Yeah.
he formed a modality called body electronics. And body electronics, they use sustained acupressure. What sustained acupressure means is essentially you hold these points within the body, oftentimes meridian points, but these could also be points in which you actually see the physical crystallization manifest, which if you analyze people's backs, we have crystals all around our spine, right? And we can find them very, very easily. And through holding these points, you can in essence, through long periods of time, whilst holding these points, it's called point holding, you can actually dissolve the crystals. And as these crystals dissolve, what tends to happen is the person starts to re-experience, they start to get access to the mental levels in which those resistances are held. So when you're holding these points on these people, right, and there's burning and searing pain at the point, he says pain is the capstone to memory. So when we experience pain, it opens our spiritual aperture, opens our aperture of our pineal, it opens the aperture of our senses, and we're able to get into the memories and the word patterns and the emotions that we initially resisted. And it gives us an opportunity to re-experience the event. A lot of the times when people, not just with point holding and what John Moraine does, but in many cases of, simply meditating, of acupuncture, of cranial sacral therapy, of Reiki, all these different modalities, oftentimes when they're done correctly, can elicit old feelings, old memories, old word patterns that, at one moment where you felt like screaming, get off me, get off me, get off me. This is a word pattern. And when we suppress this in our body, oftentimes through these modalities, years later, when we're doing this and we're on our healing journey, these thoughts, these word patterns, these emotions, and the memories can be unlocked. A lot of people experience when they heal the body, they start to gain memory about things that have happened to them that they simply buried for many, many years of their lives. So it's this idea of you're dissolving the crystallization of the body, which releases these patterns, these word patterns, the emotion patterns, and the thought patterns, and the memory, and it allows you to re-experience that. And ultimately, there's an alchemical process of when you re-experience these things. There's an alchemical process that you have to do to alchemize and transmute all of that and show yourself love. Love is the ultimate healer, and you love that experience and you don't deny it anymore. And oftentimes when people experience these things, like, sort of like, what is that modality called, where they do rebirthing and things like this, it's the same sort of process of you re-experiencing these emotions. You're re-experiencing what you've gone through in the past, and through re-experiencing it with the right principles of letting that flow through you and processing it, you can ultimately start healing on such a deep level, and on all levels as well.
Yeah, very well put. hmm And I think the body being this electrical being is really, really important. I think this is a really important thing. Like, we are electrical before we are biological, before we're chemical. Um, which, when you really think about it, seems so obvious, because when you go, even if you're in university, you're studying chemistry, and you have one look at a chemical physics textbook, you'll see that. So everything that you talk about in chemistry is literally just electricity, whether it's valuable or true, doesn't matter. It's still electrical. And that's one of the reasons why I think if we are going to study biology, that we do it from the quantum level, which is why I quite enjoy the discussions of quantum biology and the electrical component of things. You know, and I think within this, allowing the physical body to flow electrically well, that could be a whole discussion itself. But getting the feet in the ground to, even detox maybe excess electricity in the body, or aligning ourselves with proper light cycles, because that's electricity in a way, right? Like, not having these LED lights beaming at us and having full spectrum light like the sun, and candle light at night. And there's so many different ways to approach the electricity. Obviously, we could talk about non-native EMFs, definitely acting as a catalyst in my mind. If anything, I think EMFs are a true catalyst for disease. Um, and at the end of the day, I will say that, I think you can get to this point where it all cannot affect you. You can get to a point where, if you're so mentally well and you're so attuned to the rhythms of life, like you're pointing out here, if there's no stagnation, if there's no scarring, if there's no crystals, if there's no blockages in the body will just flow. The body is designed to flow. It's designed to have these infractions, but to be able to deal with them and move them out of the body, that it's what the body's designed to do. Excretion, it's fundamental. But aligning it energetically, I think, is an important point that maybe we could talk about a little more here. The body as an electric being.
Yeah, that's exactly the the basis of it all. I mean, if we simply look at our fascia, right? Our fascia,
Yeah.
yes, we are essentially a crystal. We're a crystallized being. If you look at, if you kind of look at the evolution of the world, and how we of ourselves have been morphed into the physical form that we have. We are electrical in nature, and the fascia in itself is it. If you were to rub the fascia, essentially you're going to create piezoelectricity, this form of electricity that is super conductive, but also extremely useful for the body to harness that and use that to heal itself. The pineal gland contains, not many people know this, but it's called brain sand. The pineal actually contains crystals within it.
Yeah.
These crystals are oscillating. James True talks about this, a really great YouTuber. He talks about how when the heart beats, I won't say pumps, but when it beats and there is this vortexing of the heart and it pumps, beats, shall I say, every time it beats, it pressurizes the pineal, it squeezes the pineal, and it squeezes its crystals, which oscillates, which allows the crystals to oscillate, producing piezoelectricity. Oftentimes, our pineal is seen as the third eye, but when you actually look back, it is our first eye. It's interesting. I know we're going off a little bit of a tangent here, but I think it's
It's
just
fine.
interesting because I came across this today. Is when you look at old pictures of the way people depicted alchemically the human form. There's strange pictures and depictions out there. One of the depictions that often come up in these old paintings and old sort of drawings are the cyclops, the cyclone, this one-eyed human. And I believe that in our earlier days of this morphology, we were spiritual beings to begin with. We had an etheric body. That was our body. And as the human earth and as the humans condensed into matter, we the eye that we consumed, the eye that we saw through was the one eye, was the pineal. It was the eye that was able to detect etheric energy, the energies of electricity, of vibration. And as we've slowly morphed into the human form, that eye has sunk in, and now it's a part of our brain, and it sits between the left and right hemispheres of the brain. But it's still oscillating. This is the eye that sees the electricity, that sees the vibrations of life. Just to sort of reaffirm that we are a conductive body. We work electrically. The water within our body, as I've been learning a lot from Dr. Thomas Cowan, who's talking a lot about water and how that works within the body, and how in the nerve cells that water, the EZ water, which is the fourth phase of water that creates that sort of difference in charges within the nerve cells, which allows that electricity to pass through our nerves. Right? These are the elements of the human body that we're made up of. So, of course, when we're talking about how do these non-native EMFs, how does the external world affect us? And I think if we are not observing our body, if we're not in tune with our body, if we're not practicing the right principles to elevate our health, we can be hindered by these frequencies, by these electricities that are not in tune with our body. And it can mess with our pineal, it can mess with our, that's the essence of when if you're having a lot of, it's nighttime and you're spending lots of time on your phones and devices, and you've got this blue light hitting you. That's going to affect your circadian rhythm. That's going to affect the way your pineal is able to detect the day and night cycles, because that's what it's essentially doing. Your pineal gland is your eternal clock. It's monitoring constantly the cycles of the earth, the cosmos, the day and night cycles. And these frequencies that that we're being bombarded with now and having no awareness of, can alter the way our pineal functions, can alter the way our fascia functions. When the fascia gets tight, when it gets stuck, stagnation, that electricity cannot flow. When the electricity cannot flow, the life force can't flow, and then we have the deterioration of health. We'll talk lymphatically speaking as well. If you get into the works of Samuel C. West, who talks about how the lymphatic system works with the blood, and if there's too many blood proteins entering the interstitial spaces, the spaces that sit around the cells, if too many enter at one point, it's going to disrupt what is called the sodium potassium pump, or the delicate balance of sodium and potassium, which is what creates our electrical nature of our cells, right? Which is what creates that sort of electricity in the body. And if we disrupt that, and if the lymphatic system can't get to those proteins and get rid of all the toxins in those interstitial spaces, we've got a destruction of the electricity of the cell, and we've got the degradation of the cell. So it's all revolving about how do we keep this electrical nature alive and working optimally in our body.
Yeah, amazing. And one of the problems is this materialistic construct that we have. It leaves no room for some reason. It leaves no room for this energy, this electrical component, right? Uh, like like you mentioned, Dr. Tom Cohen and Dr. Jill Pollack is doing some amazing work with this fourth phase of water that explains, I believe, the true function of these biological phenomenon, like the heart, of course, not a pump, as you mentioned there. Um, that the nerves aren't this mechanical ion exchange conductive wires, right? There's this it's much larger than that. And um I was reminded too of the hearing, the mechanical theory of hearing doesn't even align with the mathematical alignments either, right? There is this piezoelectrical component to it where it's crystals. It's at least this theory aligns more with the mathematical observations and models that were put forth. So, I think backing away from this materialistic construct is really important. And of course, we talk a lot about microbiology here, and you mentioned that when the when there's this kind of deep set stagnation that the immune system or the proteins can't get to in the body. It's interesting to me because the microbes might be able to get there, like parasites. We talk a lot about how these microorganisms can't or their immune system can't attack these microorganisms because they're hiding deeper where the immune system can't go. And I just think, well, that's their purpose, to go where the immune system can't go, and
Yeah.
obviously I'm using these terms as they're talked about in the modern way, not necessarily that we have an immune system that attacks foreign invaders, because we know that this is all generated within our bodies. But I like this idea, y- the connection of the nervous system to the microbiome that we were talking about with Emrys Goldsworthy a couple weeks ago. And I'm sure there's a true energetic component to this as well, to our microbiomes, to this connection that they have in our body in healing. Because another thing that's talked about a lot is how EMFs upregulate parasites in the body. This is even what the literature points to, what the modern practitioners point to. They say that, or even the modern alternative healthcare practitioners, I guess, that are talking about how parasites are a root cause of disease. They'll say EMFs have a big thing to do with it. Well, I'm like, I'm sure it does, but it means, one, that the EMF is more of the root cause than the parasite, because parasites aren't the root cause of any disease. But
Mhm.
I don't know if you've thought about anything that I'm kind of talking about here. I hope I'm clear as well.
Yeah, it was just a little bit. It was a little bit laggy, so I didn't catch everything you were saying. But it was along the lines of how, again, the allopathic medicine's way of viewing things is often, when they see something, they often jump to conclusions too quickly. And these conclusions often fit their own narratives and their own
Of
ways in
course.
which they want to profit ultimately off something, whether it be medication, whether it be the way we're living, or a state of health they want us to be in. Um, but it's that concept of, you know EMFs being a huge, if we look at the introduction of these telecommunication pathways throughout the years, every time they've upregulated these telecommunication pathways, every time they've installed new systems, just so happens that humanity starts to get sicker, and all of a sudden they're blaming this, and you see this time and time again. They're blaming another cause, another, this caused this caused this, another virus, this, another this, when in actuality they're not paying attention, because ultimately it doesn't serve them to look into how EMFs are affecting our body on a cellular level, and these other things that are the intermediary or bioremediations of the body. We're talking about the microbes and the parasites and all of those things. And these are our helpers, and this is where I always look at it and how it's so backwards. It's like these guys are here to help us, and you're not seeing this. You're not seeing that our body has this innate intelligence to get to the places that other things can't, to allow our bodies to deal and to live and to function in such a toxic environment, right? And we're
Mhm.
blaming them, and we're blaming them, and we're blaming them, and we're not looking at the roots of these things. And this EMF, this telecommunication stuff, is so important, which is why, over the last sort of 7 years, we've seen an increase in the amount of EMF awareness. But before that, it was extremely, extremely difficult, right? I remember being on social media like 7 years ago, just being on there, and time again, how much information about people exposing the dangers to these EMF frequencies that are coming from our 5G cell towers and all these things. And it was constantly getting buried and buried and buried and buried and censored and censored and censored, because they don't want that to affect their profits, and what they and how they want to drive ultimately socially, economically, society. So it's all, it can be quite frustrating when you look at it at that point. But at the same time, we've just got to, as people, get to the truth of how our bodies actually work. And because the more we can get to the truth about how our bodies actually work, which is the first step to doing that, is questioning, deeply inquiring into the nature of the body. And once we understand that, we can start applying the right principles to the body to not only protect ourselves, but to elevate our health. And that's on all levels: electrically, biologically, chemically. Um, yeah.
Yeah, great. Yeah, and I also think about on the EMF talk and the heart, understanding that the heart may not be this mechanical pump that we're talking about. It's no wonder that The Invisible Rainbow, a fantastic book by Arthur Furstenberg, makes the connection that since electricity's been rolled out, that we've seen increases in heart-related illnesses are a very new phenomenon, relatively speaking, and I think he makes a beautiful connection there. And to truly understand the connection, you have to get away from this mechanical view of our bodies, of our, the way that everything works, the way that nature works. We're so mechanical in our thinking, and I think in a way, that's causing us a lot of said stagnation in the health fields, at least, especially. I mean, generally as well in the sciences, I suppose, and because we're so enticed by these technological advancements and these mechanical advancements because they are amazing. We're connecting right now using these technologies. And the funny thing is, I think that if it was ever admitted that these cell communication towers and the electricity is truly causing illness, I really don't think that it would hurt their profits that much, because I don't think that too many people would stop using their cell phones. They're so addicted to it now, right? It would
That's true.
honestly, I think it would just bring people more health. Because even just shutting your Wi-Fi off at night, or airplane mode, or keeping everything kind of away from you, like all the technologies away from your body, even just a little bit of distance, or whether we build our homes in a different way to sort of help with these non-native electromagnetic frequencies, or they admit that grounding can help mitigate these effects as well, right? We get outside, start grounding. you know there's so much that you can do. You can't really, we're big on responsibility here. We don't want to blame anything for our illnesses. We take full responsibility, and that's a part of it, though. But part of it is understanding as well. You need to understand how it's working. You need to understand what you can do about it, because if you're going to use these technologies, you should be sure to be mitigating the effects as well, right? Like, I use technology all the time. I connect with the world through it. I'm probably sound a little bit like a hypocrite, but I'm trying to be honest too here, and say, like, there are practices that I do to try and avoid this as well. So I don't know, I think that's an important message, and I just wanted to share that. But I think we should. I wanted to have a discussion on iridology because I know you're big into this, and it's a topic that is so unbelievably fascinated. The eyes are gates to the soul, or there are so many sayings about the eyes in general. And I think they tell a great story, and I'm sure we can maybe segue it by relating it to what we've been discussing, how what you can see in the eyes, or what really is iridology maybe as well. So I'll open the
Yeah,
floor there for you now and let you go.
yeah, yeah. It kind of ties in nicely to sort of how we understand the body, because iridology is one of those tools, one of those primal tools, one of those tools that we always have with us that helps us understand our body. A lot of people can agree with the idea that our palm, we have palming and we have reflexes from the palms and the feet reflexology that relate to the different organs. Our teeth are related to different organs, our ears, our face, right? And yet our eyes are the most complex organs in the entire body. They're not widely understood, but they're extremely, extremely complex, which would mean that it would show much more complexity in the body. And that is what they do. The eyes are connected to the rest of our body through the optic nerves, through the central nervous system, the autonomic nervous system, the limbic system, and they are connected to the different tissues, organs, and glands within the body. And often what happens is when there is tissue changes within the body, when there's something that's happening with the adrenals, when there's something that's happening with the colon, these signals are translated in real time to the eyes. And the eyes can pick up these subtle changes that are happening with the tissue. And if you know how to read the eyes, you know what is happening with the different tissues, organs, and glands that are in your body. And this was first sort of discovered. I mean, if you look back through, thousands of years, we've always been perplexed and we've always tried to understand the eye. Look at the ancient Egyptians, look at, China, look at the Eastern traditions and philosophy. There's always depictions and talks about what is the eye, and what are the eyes. So we've always, as humans, been fascinated and are known there is something symbolic with the eyes. There's the first sort of iridology, or the first relation between the eyes being reflex to the rest of the body. The first time that came about was around the 1600s, the mid 1600s. It was a long time ago.
Wow.
Iridology as a formal study came about around 1860. I think his name was Dr. Ignaz Pesce, I believe his name was. And he was a Austrian doctor. And as a child, what ended up happening was, the story goes, is an owl broke its leg in his back garden. An owl was trapped in his back garden, and he went to try to, as an 11-year-old child, tried to rescue it. And in trying to rescue the owl, he accidentally broke the owl's leg. What he found as he was nurturing the owl and trying to bring the owl back to good health to let him go, was he found as he broke the leg, there was a black sort of line within the owl, scarring line within the owl's eye. And as he was nurturing the owl, as he was bringing the leg back to good health, he noticed that line had gained these white fibers. It had lightened, it had changed. This was his first introduction and in curiosity into the eyes. Years later, as he became a doctor, he was remembered by this moment and began his studies into the eye. And he actually created what would be the first, in the 1860s, I believe, the first sort of formal study of iridology, as he mapped out all of the reflex zones from the eyes and the body. It goes back a long way, and iridology is still a study that a lot of people are figuring more out about. It's relatively, the formality of it and the ability to practice it is relatively new, and it's being understood day by day. But it's absolutely fascinating. So we have these tissues in our body that are constantly changing through toxemia, through stress, through trauma. And these signs and these tissue changes are being relayed into the eyes. And so the eyes can show us the integrity of our cells within our adrenal glands, within our thyroid, within our bowels. It can show us where toxicity possibly is spreading from our bowels to the rest of our body. It can show us our it can show us our sort of personality traits based on what is happening physiologically. It can show us so many wonderful things that if you can read the eyes truly, it becomes one of these most profound tools to understand what is really happening in your body. There's a few reasons for that. One, it's relatively inexpensive. Two, it's invasive. So all you need is a good quality picture of the eye. I mean, unless you have some sort of condition in which bright lights or having something flashed in your eyes is quite detrimental to you, it's relatively safe for most people. Second thing is, it's a whole body picture of what's happening, right? Your eyes will never lie. Your eyes are showing you exactly what is there. And if somebody is skilled in iridology, they can tell you what is happening in your body. And it gives a full body picture. So there's not many modalities that are actually showing you what is happening from the head to the toe. All the organs and glands and systems responsible for what is happening with your health. There's no other modality that shows that. It's absolutely wonderful and beautiful. The fourth thing is it can be understood at a relatively decent level by most people. Like, you do not need a specialist to sort of go through all the results and tell you this is what you've got, this is what you've got. It's like, no, you can read this yourself, right? Like, the terminology doesn't have to be elaborate or anything, and it's not. It's just simply relaying what we see in the eyes and what that tells us about your body. And you can read that and you can see that. And it's wonderful in that manner that it gives you that reliance on yourself where you're not handing out your authority to anybody else, which is beautiful. Yeah, so it's like I've been using iridology to sort of, there's multiple ways to use it, and I'm still in my journey of understanding how I can use that authentically and masterfully. At the end of the day, I want to make sure I'm giving my best with it. So I use that at this moment to understand what is happening to the body. We're understanding what organs and glands need working, what inherent or what genetic weaknesses that we might see within your eyes, and how we can work on those inherent weaknesses to pick up the body and bring you back to good rhythm and good health. And so I use iridology as a tool to discover. This is a discovery phase, and I help my clients with like detox stuff. But there's so many. That's such a small way of looking at it, and I'm sort of looking at how we can use iridology for other more profound things. Right? There is something called Tibetan pulsing. I learned about this. I was at a week sort of intensive doing some training there, and there was a woman who told me about, she did this Tibetan pulsing thing, and I was like, what is this? And again, it was this sort of sustained acupressure thing that they used to do in Tibet. But to find those acupressure points, they would look into the person's eyes. The eyes would tell you where your energy flows in the body are weak. And I'm curious to understand that Tibetan iridology understanding, because again, there's so many schools of iridology that have sort of different thoughts. Generally, there is a general basis that is understood and clinically practiced by all sort of schools. But again, some talk more about the emotional components that you can see in the eyes, where you're holding anger, resentment, sadness, grief in different parts of your body. And again, if you can use the eyes to understand where energy flows are lacking, that's an amazing tool to regenerate the body, right? If we're talking about the electricity of the body, it's an amazing tool to understand how we can to upregulate that. So, that's essentially what iridology is, and yeah, it's a beautiful science.
A very useful tool, one that can't be taken away. You don't need any intricate machinery or whatever it is too, right? And it's, yeah, like you said, you mentioned some great benefits of it there, yeah. So in within the eyes, like, you can see these, you were alluding to this, obviously with the Tibetan perspective that you can kind of see these patterns where the energy isn't flowing. Can you see emotions in the eyes? Can you see these mental phenomenon, right? Like I suppose maybe through the energetical components. Is that something that's talked about a little bit in iridology?
Yeah. So usually with a lot of the iris signs that you see, there is always a psychological element that comes with that. And depending on how it's iridology is all about, it's not this sort of black and white thing that you see this and this is what is happening. It's more of, you have to become a master of how you formulate your understanding of that particular eye. Different signs in different locations, if those signs are apparent, may represent something else. If they were in different locations, it could represent something else. So it's like you have to paint this whole picture of the body just to really understand what's going on. But for an example, like we have the collarette border, which is we have the pupil, and then we have this sort of like collarette, this indentation that goes around the pupil, and this represents in iridology the colon and the bowels, right? And we have very two distinct types of the collarette. I mean, there's quite a few distinctions of the collarette, but it represents the autonomic nervous system and also the bowels. And we have, sometimes we have two classes of distended collarette, where the collarette border kind of comes out like this. It's very sort of open like this. And then we have a constricted collarette, where the collarette border lies closer to the pupil. These two different signs can represent psychological behavior within that person. A constricted collarette may represent somebody who holds their emotions in, maybe holds in anger and holds in grief within the bowels. A distended collarette may be somebody who is a little bit more extroverted, they're a bit more outgoing, they're a bit more of a people's person. These things can tell us about our behavior. A prolapsed collarette may tell us something, a prolapsed sort of transverse colon may tell us something about our relationship with our father or mother, something that may have caused resentment to our father or mother. And so all these signs, when you look at them, they do have a psychological correlation. Um, and of course, it's debated amongst different schools what these signs mean. I know his name's David Pesic. In his school of iridology, the holistic iridology, he talks a lot about the emotional aspect. He talks about what emotions are buried within different tissues and organs depending on the signs we see in the eyes, which gives us a good indication of the kind of psychological work we have to do with ourselves to let go and release these emotions. What I was talking with body electronics, but back at the beginning of this podcast was this talk was, when we're talking about the crystals within the body, oftentimes we can formulate where those crystals are based on the eyes, right? We see lacunas or lesions within the lower back, right, which the eyes can show us, which if we then go to the lower back, and we might see this sort of crystallized lump within the lower back. Maybe this person had a bad car accident, which sometimes it can show structural issues, and the eyes can show that. And what we're seeing now is this crystallization forming in the back, and it gives us an indication of where we have to hold those points, where we have to dissolve those crystals. And encoded within those crystals, as we discussed, were the emotions, memories, and word patterns which come forth. So iridology, when you understand it, can be used for so many different modalities. It's so powerful in that aspect, in that regard.
Hmm. So cool. You could see the healing in it too, right? You can use it almost as a measure of if what you're doing is working as well, which I think is kind of cool. Like that story with the owl was very, very interesting. But you see it all the time. You see these iris transformations of somebody before they, start focusing on their health. They have very dark eyes almost, is something Agenus talks about as well. Very dark eyes being an indication of disease, and then they lighten up as you sort of heal the body and detox and build it up strong. And so I think that's really interesting. It's really hard to deny a truth to the field because it's very visible, and it's like you mentioned, it's not like you can have this really rigid structure of how you can approach it, right? You need to kind of attune yourself with the rhythms of the eyes themselves, right? The rhythm within the construct and within the integration of the individual, but the results generally you could see consistencies, which I think is so interesting. I think it's amazing. I think it's amazing. And I think it's a great tool to use, even if it's not necessarily the primary healing modality, I guess. In a way it is, because what what I find is that having an understanding and a knowledge and a philosophy behind health and healing, and even within yourself, like the self observation, to be able to learn as much as you can about yourself, is the primary way to health, right? Because all has to come from within. Healing does come from within. There's only so much practitioners can do. If the individual doesn't want to change, and I'll relate it back to healing the eyes, because I've been on a similar journey, and I faced challenges, um, and I've been trying to understand my eyes, trying to understand what the problem is, and you know, it can be challenging, but you really need to understand what is going on before you can really do anything about it, because one, the healing is going to be completely different for every individual. But learning this underlying principle allows you to choose the right modalities forward as well. Um, and I sort of lost my point there, but you know, but regardless, so I went on a little tangent there for no reason, but like, it's just very interesting, because I find, for some people there's some things that work, for others there are other things that work, and you kind of get to the same results. And the reason why I like iridology is because you can see it, you can get results using different methods, and I love that. I love that about iridology.
That's the thing with iridology. It's like it's and I've used iridology on, like I had a client who he was 23 years old on a pacemaker, been going to the doctor since he was 11 years old. They couldn't tell him anything about what is going on with his heart. The influences, why it's happening. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. We don't know. We don't know. Here's drugs. Here's drugs. Here's drugs. Here's drugs. Here's a pacemaker. Right. And then I did an iridology report, and I already had some sort of understandings of what possibly could show up in his eyes, and some of those things were confirmed. And, we saw signs within the adrenal section. We saw signs within the thyroid. We saw signs within the bowels. Maybe bowels putting pressure on the heart. And I shared this information with him, and he was blown away. He was like, I learned more from these, whatever he paid for the iridology report in this amount of time than any doctor has told me over the last, you know, 15 years of my life. It's like, that's how powerful it can be, because it shows you the truth. Your eyes never lie. Ultimately, it's like that. When you get to it, it's like, that's it. It's showing you the truth. It's showing you exactly what's happening inside your body. It's all the inner becoming the outer. It's all being reflexed into your eye. But the amazing thing about iridology then is it's like, okay, now once we've seen this, once we've seen the inherent weaknesses, once we've seen that these glands are not working too well, that the bowel is backed up, and we might have indications or tendencies for, intestinal insufficiency or things like this. Once we see these things, it's like, okay, now you have an actionable plan to work on, right? Now we can actually start like considering what are the different modalities, what are the things that you have to implement in your day, emotional work, energetic modalities, physical modalities, supplements, herbal programs. What are these things that you can start to do that works on those exact weaknesses that your eyes are showing you, right? If you know exactly where these things are stemming from, or potentially where they're stemming from, it gives you the power to go ahead with your healing journey. And that's what I try to instill. It's like, at the very least, I want iridology to give you the power and belief behind your own healing journey, to go ahead and start working on the root causes, because that's exactly what it's showing you. It's showing you where the roots of your certain issues may be coming from. So it's a beautiful modality in that aspect. The eyes. I'm learning so much about the eyes recently, and coming across when you mentioned before how everything is internal. Everything, and it's this concept of like every outer creative expression manifested first in the internal self. Everything, it goes from the yin to the yang, right? It goes yin yang, and
Yeah.
when you understand that literally everything is internal, it makes sense how your body will show. Your eyes are literally like a TV screen. They're a TV screen, or they're an opera. They're an orchestra, essentially, of your insides. And they're playing the notes. They're showing you the notes of what's happening inside of your body. Talking about that rhythm, right? They're showing you the notes of your organs, of your systems. And if you can read those notes, you can understand how to put that rhythm back in place. Not just not just iridology, but if we're talking about vision. I'm coming across a lot of information talking about how vision today is, we tend to think of it as we have the material world and our eyes are collecting that information through the light, and and going it goes, the signals go back to the back of the head, the amygdala processes it, all of that stuff, and then we see the world. But when you really question, when you really inquire into that aspect, some startling realizations start to occur where you start to understand, or you start to think maybe our eyes are not showing us the world outside. Maybe our eyes are, like I said, the orchestra. And what is happening is we're perceiving the energetics of our world, and our brain is showing us what it wants us to see. So it's backwards. We're not seeing the outside world and it's being processed and shown to us. It's our brain, our pineal is perceiving the energetics of the world, formulating that picture in the amygdala and being shown and broadcasted into the eyes. Right? This goes into a lot of this. And one of the things that, as I was coming across a lot of this information, and James True, again, is someone I quoted before, is an amazing channel to go ahead and look at how he talks about the first eye, because a lot of this is his research, so I don't want to step on any of that. But it's really, really profound, because then if you think back to this concept of everything is yin, everything is always internalized first before it can be manifested in the external world. That's how thoughts work. That's how vibration works, right? Then it would make sense that actually, it's not the external world that's being shown to us. It's like we're creating that world through what our pineal, what our first eye is perceiving. And this is what, I was about to touch on in the earlier sort of talk, but I didn't want to sort of go too much in a tangent. But seeing as though we're here, it's like, these crystals, this oscillation of the pineal, this pineal that is showing us and that is perceiving and constantly picking up the vibrations of the world, is communicating with our amygdala. It's called mother amygdala. The amygdala is what is the sort of is processing everything, all the vibrations that are coming in, and it's communicating with your body. Your amygdala is saying to your body and to yourself, all right, I'm going to show you this now, right? This is a pretty powerful form of energy. Let me show you. And it's broadcasted into the eyes. And oftentimes, if you look at the way the cones and rods are set up in the back of the eyes, it looks literally like an orchestra. And the eyes, the cones and rods, they're facing backwards, as if they're picking up the information first from the brain, from the amygdala. It's such fascinating stuff, which gets into new understandings about how the eyes actually work, and actually explains a lot about certain sort of health conditions that we perceive today as bad, things like schizophrenia and Parkinson's and stuff like that. Um, but yeah, going off at a little bit of a tangent, but the eyes, they're just truly not fully understood, and it's such a fascinating area of research that I really encourage everybody to go down.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean to build on that tangent, this is something that's talked about not even in the maybe as above so below, but it's not even talked about in the same circles that you're talking about. It's talked about in the like as a man thinketh. Everything was a sustained thought before it was the reality. Like what we see out there is truly just a construct of our being. at the same time. Um, and I think that's what you're hinting at there, and so this is a really common among many fields, even it gives more value to the power of visualization. And, visualization, when you read about it, seems so woo woo, like, this is just nonsense. But until you realize what it really is, it won't do anything for you. If you think you're just going to sit around and visualize everything to happen, no, no, you need to align yourself with your desires. You need to be energetically what you want before you get it. And obviously there needs to be a certain amount of giving to receive, and the sort of balances of nature that maybe the alchemists talk about very well. And but yeah, this is a phenomenal way of explaining. So I think it all really helps in aligning it as well. This kind of understanding of the most beautiful, I think, is that you related the rods and the cones to an orchestra and how they're pointed in a different direction than you would think, right? You would think it would be wide to receive. That just makes good sense. It just makes good sense. And so
Yeah.
there's certainly a reason why it goes the other way. So I'm really glad you brought that up. I'm really glad that you mentioned that fella's YouTube channel. Definitely be looking into that. That sounds amazing. Um, yeah, I mean, this has been a great chat. Maybe you could share any final thoughts that you have, anything that you might have missed or that you want to share.
Yeah, just just to sort of finish up and touch upon this idea of we every creative expression, every creative act or manifestation has always originated in the inner first before the outer. And when you understand that our internal body is relaying constantly signs to our external body for it to be perceived and visualized, all of this, our body stores our memories and trauma. Like it's all on you. Like it's you are your authority, and you can be confident and comfortable that your body is doing exactly what it needs to. And I think understanding that concept, if you're not afraid of responsibility, which is a huge point, but if you're not afraid of responsibility and being responsible for your health and the way you conduct yourself in this world, it gives you a means, and it gives you a comfort in knowing that you can work, you have the authority over your body, and you can work through all the things that you do not like about your life, or that you want to be changed, so that the goals that you want to set for yourself can be achieved. Because that is the ultimate realization, is like you are cause and effect of your reality, right? You're not just the effect, you are cause. And a lot of people get scared of this, because then they realize, oh shit, I caused this demise of my life, because I'm not happy. I'm married to the wrong person. I'm overweight. I don't like myself. But it's like, no, okay. After you get over those resistances of, oh crap, I caused this, there's a sense of power,
Yeah.
of awe and of joy and of excitement, that it's actually within your power to maneuver and dictate the means of your life. So, there's so many things I would love to speak to you about, and maybe we can definitely leave this for like another episode regarding the crystals and how they work, in terms of how they keep our resistances in a constant state of creation. But that's a whole other topic. um, but yeah, it's been a wonderful call. It's been a wonderful talk with you. We've touched on some amazing concepts, and actually, this is one of the first times of me actually coming on these podcasts and coming on these shows, and speaking about these things. So I really appreciate you giving me that opportunity to do that. It's been really wonderful.
No, no, no. The pleasure's mine, honestly. It has been amazing, and I'm really glad in the direction that we took this today. And yeah, it's definitely opened a lot of doors. So it's necessary that we'll have to do this again, which is nice. Which is
Yeah,
nice. Yeah,
yeah, definitely.
yeah. So maybe you could tell the listeners where to find you, how they can support you, how they can learn more from you.
Yeah, definitely. So I'm on pretty much all social media channels under the names at Found Consciousness. Some channels are at Found Conscious, because some of them got deleted. I've had to change and add the ness at the end. Um, So I'm on Instagram. You can find me on Facebook, although I don't post there too much. I'm on Telegram. I'm on TikTok. I'm on YouTube. You can go to my website if you're interested in iridology consultations, detox support. It's foundconsciousness.com. And I have a free detox group with 2,500 members at this moment in time. It's a completely free group where we get together, we form relationships, we talk about detox. If there's any questions that you have regarding your health, your journey, what things you want to implement in your detox, you can go there. Wonderful, helpful community. We have monthly calls where we do group discussions. So you get free access to that. Yeah, and so you can find me a lot in that group. And yeah, that's mainly it.
Amazing. Amazing. Well, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Liev.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to thank you all for listening. You should know this is not medical advice. This is for your informational purposes only, of course. But remember that we're all responsible, sovereign beings capable of thinking, criticizing, and understanding absolutely everything and anything that comes our way. We, the people, and the greater forces are self healers, self governable, self teachers, and so much more. Please reach out if you have any questions, criticism, comments, concerns. You know where to find me on Instagram. That's the best place to have a chat with me. And listen, I really appreciate you guys coming out. If you could give us a like, share, comment, review, save, whatever you're on, help support us. That'd be amazing. You can also hit the link down below and support me, buy me a coffee. That'd be fantastic. Not necessary, but it definitely helps in allowing me to put more time into this, um, which I'm doing anyways, really, so it doesn't matter. But it would be much appreciated. And yeah, definitely not necessary. The like, comments, shares, all the follows, that goes a long way as well. And hearing the feedback goes furthest. I love when people reach out and even just to say hello. So I appreciate you all. I appreciate you all for listening. I appreciate you all in general. Just remember there's two types of people in this world, those who believe they can, those who believe they can't, and they're both correct. All right, guys, thanks for listening. Take care.